everyone. This is Frank J. with Meetings with Remarkable Humans. And this is a remarkable human that I just met today, and I'm really excited for this interview. This is Juliet. Juliet, how do you say your last name again?
Yelverton.
Yelverton.
Yeah, Yelverton.
Wow.
Yes.
And basically, I stopped by, and we're going to be using her center here in Glastonbury for our up and coming retreat. And we just got to talking, and you really inspired me because of the work that you're doing, which is similar to what I'm doing, and I'm deepening my study in, which is trauma work. You work with people, or you work with therapists and teach.
Yes, I teach therapists and carers how to heal trauma healing skills. Yeah.
Trauma healing skills.
So the whole point of Healing Waters, we've been running for 10 years now, and although we have accommodation and groups and different kinds of therapies, the whole focus on Healing Waters was setting up a trauma healing centre.
Interesting, and that's the retreat centre. It's called Healing Waters.
Yes, and we're actually planning to expand it so that we can broaden our reach. I mean, at the moment we have people from all over the world, but we're focusing more in on trauma, because trauma is the most significant planetary problem that we have. And
what do you mean by that? How is that the most significant planetary problem?
Because practically everybody on the planet suffers from trauma. Yeah, it was really only in the 60s that it became known that war veterans were suffering from trauma, and it was at that time that PTSD was set up as a diagnosis. You know, up until that time, soldiers suffering from shock and that were considered to be malingering very often. Yeah? So now that's recognised, PTSD and trauma is recognised as a problem resulting from severe abuse, natural disasters and so on. So now we have that kind of awareness, but in fact there is this kind of secondary category of people suffering from trauma which is largely invisible but just as significant, and they're suffering just as much as soldiers suffering from PTSD.
In what ways? How does this cause? So you're saying basically the ordinary person is suffering from maybe a subtle form of trauma?
No, just
trauma in general.
It could be as severe.
It could be as severe, but it's much under the radar.
Under the radar.
Unrecognized.
Because nothing significantly bad has been seen to happen to them.
I see.
For instance, people that have gone through surgery are often left very traumatized. Yeah? Because although we go through surgery thinking that it's going to heal the body, but in fact for the body has been cut and you know, really dramatic things done to it, which the nervous system is feeling that's like an attack. Yeah? So the animal part of the brain isn't rationalising and thinking, oh, this is for my good. The animal part of the brain is feeling like it's just been damaged in some way.
And so what happens when the body has been damaged? What happens? What kind of signs show up? How does the body process that?
Well, let me just answer your first question first of all. So you said that what is the secondary categorization of trauma? It's like people that go through experiences that are not recognised normally as being harmful. For instance, children that are sent to boarding school, extremely damaging. Yeah. Small children, for instance, that have accidents, like falling from the high chair or being lost in the shopping mall or arcade, can be just as traumatised, because to a small child those kind of things are very severe, and they may come out of that situation with extreme trauma. Yeah?
Interesting.
Children that have an injury that then have to be held down to have the injury repaired.
Interesting.
Yeah, like stitches. Anything where somebody is trapped is extremely traumatising. So a child held down to have stitches is very traumatising. Yeah.
And does this stick with somebody if they never processed it? Does this stay with them when they're an adult?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. The huge range of trauma is a result of developmental trauma for children whose parents haven't been present and emotionally available to them. Yeah, so many children come out of that kind of, you know, very, very busy.
And how many, hold that thought. How many of you, I know I've experienced, but how many of you have experienced your parents not being present?
Yeah.
And then you're saying could be one of the biggest traumas.
Absolutely, developmental trauma. Yes.
And what are some signs? What does that affect?
Well, things that are diagnosed as ADHD, for instance, children, that usually has trauma as an underpinning.
Yeah. Interesting.
People that have addictions, almost all people with addictions, have them as a result of being traumatized.
Interesting.
Yeah. Many illnesses like fibromyalgia, depression, many of these chronic illnesses have trauma as an
trauma.
Now, so the definition of trauma.
That's what I was about to get at, because how many of you can relate to something that she's saying, or know somebody that can relate to one of these conditions? I mean, they're so common in our society, in our communities, and in the people that we know and love. However, it does get unrecognized and mostly untreated or not treated correctly. I can see that.
Absolutely. So many children are misdiagnosed and put on, especially in the States.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to Dr. Gabor Mate,
who is that?
Dr. Gabor Mate.
Okay.
Or Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who are both American pioneers in the trauma field. They give you shocking statistics of the number of children and people that are misdiagnosed. And they're suffering from trauma, but the misdiagnosis actually doesn't help them at all, because then
that could even be more traumatizing. You get the misdiagnosed. I know so many people that constantly look for healing in this and that, and it's almost as if that adds into the story.
Secondary traumatization. So being mislabeled, misdiagnosed, gives a whole nother layer of trauma, and having people judge them and criticize them.
And then they feel like there's something wrong with them because over the years they haven't gotten...
Especially people suffering from addiction. It's very painful. So to come for the definition of trauma.
The definition of trauma, hear this.
This is really important, because people interpret the word trauma as meaning the event that's happened, and if it's a bad event it's trauma, and if it's not a bad event it's not trauma. But that is not the definition of trauma in the way that I'm speaking, and the way Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about it. Trauma is not the event, it's the imprint that's left in the nervous system after the event. So the imprint that's left in the nervous system is that the nervous system, instead of having this nice, even way of functioning, like with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system working in tandem, and just carefully modulating and balancing each other, now we have the nervous system which gets triggered into very high levels of activation with massive surges of adrenaline or cortisol, and dropping down into massive amounts of dopamine and endorphins with a very flattened response. So people can't function on this calm level anymore. They start to get very adrenalized or very depressed.
Yeah, and
on
you
a roller coaster.
How many of you know somebody or yourself constantly go up and down? I know I went through that. I mean, I've had my own story, and I know a lot of you that follow my work know the things that I've experienced and a lot of traumas. And for a long time, up, down, and I didn't know how to process it.
Your relationships get destroyed, you're in fights, like people pick a fight because they misinterpret something. So the thing with trauma is that we get triggered all the time into feeling like we're about to die.
And feeling like we're about to die. Yeah,
so a small thing can remind you of the original event. Say for instance you're driving along and you're about to have a head-on collision, and just at the point of impact you looked down and you saw your yellow cardigan on the car seat. So if you survive the collision but you end up traumatized because the nervous system is stuck in this pattern, but from then on the colour yellow can be the trigger that causes your nervous system then to go crazy.
So anytime you see yellow, it can
make you feel you're about to die.
Reassociated.
So you have a massive surge of adrenaline or a massive surge of endorphins and so on that drop you into collapse and overwhelm. Yeah.
Okay, I have a few questions. How about the original event that happens that creates the trauma initially? Over a period of years, it can be unrecognized by the person, so they may not know what happened. Now, is it necessary to bring that event up to process it?
No, not at all.
It's not.
And this is where a lot of harm has happened, because in the 60s we had the concept of the primal scream and catharsis, and out of that developed the psychotherapy as we know it today.
Mm-hmm.
And what was discovered, although people went into catharsis and got in touch with a lot of intense emotions, that actually that was harmful. It re-traumatized people.
Interesting.
Yeah? Because the brain cannot differentiate between an event that's actually happened and an event that appears to be happening because you're emoting intensely about it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah? So when you go into intense emotions, to the brain, it's a re-traumatization.
The re-traumatization.
Yes, as if that terrible thing's happening.
Rather than a catharsis.
It's not healing.
The theory is that it's going to release.
Yeah, it's not. You're not a reservoir of stuff that has to be released. What you are is you're getting triggered all the time into a misfunctioning of the nervous system.
So before we go on to understanding how to process it, what is a preventative experience? Say, for example, you're in a very intense, someone's in a very intense emotional experience, a trauma that could possibly happen, and they have a little awareness. What's a way that we can process it quickly so it doesn't turn into this lifelong?
Well, usually when somebody has a traumatic experience, when you're in a life-death situation, that then immediately you're going to go through that fight or flight, and you're going to go into collapse and overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
So really the prevention is immediately afterwards as to how you're treated.
How you're treated.
Yeah. It's to give you the opportunity to go through the feelings of the event and to release the feelings from your body. Yeah.
But not through catharsis, or is that just one technique?
The catharsis is bringing up the past. So at the moment you're in this scenario, you're actually there at the time of the event.
Yeah.
So you need to discharge the energies of that activation, so you need to be allowed to shake, you need to be supported, you need to be in touch with what's going on in your body, rather than being tranquilized, for instance. You need to have somebody compassionate, caring and supportive there that's listening to you and helping you and supporting you. Stay present with what's happening to you. Yeah? And then follow up afterwards with support and kindness and an understanding that you've just gone through this. Yeah? So the traditional ways of saying, oh, come on, pull yourself together, or it wasn't that bad, or you don't cry. That's what's harmful.
It's incredibly harmful.
Yeah, because it suppresses the body's need to release.
And for some of you that are watching that know somebody that's going through trauma, or they have these behaviors that you don't quite understand, and you love them, and you're trying to give them the best of your advice, but however, it could be very harmful. We don't know what somebody's going through, what they're processing. I would like to know, before we come to the last end of this interview, I would like to know how you got into this work.
Okay.
And I would like to know a little bit about your story. How did you get here, and why are you so passionate? I can feel that you're very passionate about helping people process trauma.
Okay, well, I suppose I'm typical of my generation, and the fact that we went through 2 world wars close to each other. This is why practically everybody's traumatized. Because traumatized parents often give rise to traumatized children. Because trauma is transgenerational unless we actually heal ourselves and we stop it. That's the first thing. So
is it generational by basically the influence of the parent, or is it in the actual DNA?
Actually in the DNA.
Actually in the DNA.
Because when we're traumatized, the DNA starts to change.
Interesting. Yeah? When we're traumatized, the DNA starts to change. Interesting.
Yeah. So I came from, my mother was in the Second World War as a child, and she was, when they were bombing London, she was sent to the country. So to avoid the bombing. But children that were sent away from their parents actually suffered more harm than the children that stayed with their parents and witnessed the bombing, because then you have a breaking of the bond between mother and child. So there's developmental trauma. Yeah. So my mother wasn't very present with me when she was rearing me. Plus she was divorced as soon as I was born. and that she was a very young parent. My father was very young. So as a consequence, I was then moved between family relatives for my whole life. So I suffered attachment disorder. So I had no one to bond with, because every one of my, I was 6 months here, 3 months somewhere else, yeah? So very, very damaging. So as a result of that, when children suffer developmental trauma, it means that part of their brain doesn't grow.
Interesting.
Part of the brain involved with making good decisions, being able to discriminate, being able to form safe relationships. Yeah? So this is true of millions of young people.
Millions of young people. So how did you process through? Fast forward.
Well,
what was your journey on healing yourself?
Because I went through a series of marriages that didn't work. I paired up with people who had addictions and were alcohol problems. I had a series, I lost 2 babies, died after birth, had a series of car accidents.
All of these things. And do you think that it was connected to basically...
Yeah, everything grows out of everything else.
So you're saying that everything grows out of everything else. So I want you to hear this. If you find yourself in repeating abusive relationships, or repeating destructive patterns, whether they're relationships, whether they're with money, whether they're with your career or any other part of your life, and you just see it repeating, what I'm hearing is that it may have something to do with your own nervous system and what has happened in your past. Not saying that you need to live there, but saying that maybe what we need to start to do is look within, find a way to process and heal this in a healthy and safe way, not a harming way, but in a healthy and safe way, which ideally we'll give you some resources to do at the end of this video. Because before you start to try to fix something without, you may have to first start to process it within.
Yeah, it's important to heal yourself within.
Yes.
First of all, trauma recapitulates itself, so the psyche is always trying to resolve it in some way.
Interesting.
So this is why you have the repeating patterns. Yeah.
Until it's resolved.
Until it's resolved.
Interesting. But the psyche tries to resolve it, but it doesn't do a great job until we kind of put our conscious effort into it.
Yeah. So developing a conscious effort, developing mindfulness is key.
What is mindfulness?
Okay, so when you develop mindfulness, you're actually developing the part of the frontal cortex, the medial frontal cortex, that's able to have a reflective experience, examination of what's happening to yourself. Yeah, so you've been able to look within. Okay, you can't heal trauma simply from thinking your way out of it, because the frontal cortex does not have any direct pathways back to the reptilian brain, which is the part that's sending the danger signal.
Interesting.
But the medial frontal cortex, through mindfulness, does have a pathway back. Yeah.
Interesting.
To the limbic system.
So you're saying rational thought can't do it,
No.
but awareness.
That's why psychotherapy in itself can't really do it. It can help to a certain extent, but this top-down processes in the mind down is not in itself sufficient to really heal trauma. So mindfulness is important, but also somatic approaches, working through the body, through sensory experiences that has direct feedback up through the vagus nerve and back to the reptilian brain, is very powerful in healing trauma. So the pioneers in this is Dr. Peter Levine, who developed somatic experiencing, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who's explored many. Yeah. So Bessel works very much with a whole range of methods of healing trauma. Body-based methods like yoga is very helpful, and practical things that are helpful, but it needs to be coupled with actually understanding about the trauma as well. So just going and doing yoga on its own is helpful to a certain extent, but the more you understand about how trauma is affecting you, the better. And then a method known as EMDR is very helpful.
EMDR.
Eye movement desensitization reprogramming. Yeah, that's very helpful in healing single episode trauma, simple trauma. Yeah, like a bad accident or something. But it's not so helpful for very complex developmental trauma. Where you've got many layers. Yeah, so those are the
fascinating. So let's go back to your story. So this, all relationships, all these things are happening to you, And then what happened? Did you hit a rock bottom? How did you find this information and actually not only find the information but go through the healing yourself?
Well, I studied as a craniosacral therapist in the early 90s, and I've always been interested in healing. So as I was having my difficult experiences, then I was also taking a healing approach to that, and I was introduced to trauma healing back in the early 90s. So I started to explore that, and I started working with my own clients. So that's really how it's grown, is that I've had a massive amount of interactions with people that are highly traumatized. So a lot of experience of working with people. And
what did you learn from all of that? What are some of the top things you learned from working with so many people?
The most important thing is to be able to empty oneself and to be totally present and compassionate, without judgment, in order to support somebody and to create a vessel of safety and well-being, because safety is the number one thing needed to heal trauma.
Have you seen people miraculously heal? Like they go through their trauma and they truly process it and heal themselves?
I don't know if I'd say the word miraculously, because trauma is quite a difficult thing to heal. It's difficult, but it's totally possible. And yes, I have seen some incredible shifts in people.
Yeah, beautiful. So how about if somebody's sort of like, they have kids, they have a family, but they're totally suffering inside of themselves and they're ready to change now. What is some advice that they can start now? If they're alone, maybe they don't have the resources, we can give them some links or somewhere to go, but where do they start? If you can give some advice in less than 60 seconds, what would that be to everybody watching?
Reach out to someone. You need to reach out and research and find somebody that understands you and can support you. And if you can't do that, then the other thing is just to begin to take care of yourself. And that's very difficult if you're really traumatized, but to start resourcing yourself and nourishing yourself. Because by paying attention to your body and nourishing yourself and giving yourself pleasurable activities, walking in the country, good food and so on, that is the most positive route to healing trauma.
Thank you so much. That was really so wonderful. Thanks everybody for watching. And where can we find you and your work?
Okay, well I'm Healing Water Sanctuary.
HealingWaterSanctuary.com.
And JulietYelverton.com. It's healingwatersanctuary.co.uk. So you
.co.uk.
put the link underneath.
Yeah, I'll put the links up. But thank you so much. I imagine some of you, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments and reach out to me and
do contact me.
Contact her.
Yes, because I can put you in touch with some means of getting some help. So at the sanctuary here we run retreats and trainings and retreats in other countries as well. So there's a lot of help available.
Yeah, you're not alone. That's for sure. You're not alone.
Well, that's really important to know that you're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Okay.